Hello, and welcome to Talking Shift, a casual chat about watches, collecting, and anything else that drives the conversation. This is episode 7. My name is Thomas Kalara. I'm a timepiece specialist over at Analog Shift, and I'm joined by a couple of usual suspects. Down on the couch over there, we've got Nick, the service guy. What's up, Nick?
How's it going? Excited to be here.
All right, right on. Josh Coates, the other timepiece specialist, partner in crime. What's up, man?
I'm good, man. I'm just happy to be here. Thank you so much, Remi, for having us.
Right on. And then Josh beat me right to it. We have a special guest today, Remi Martin, Showroom Manager of...
Great name, Remi Martin. Great name.
Great name. I'm glad someone brought it up. I'm sure that's probably the first...
You wouldn't believe the number of people telling me this in the US. It's crazy.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. I didn't want to bring it up, but yeah, definitely that's a casual name, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Baltic Showroom Manager here in New York City. We are in a beautiful space here, right? So this is the showroom located in Soho. Can you kind of explain where we're at right now and just how this place came to be?
So this is our third showroom as a company. We've opened the first one in Paris back in 2018. When the brand first started. We then opened a location in New York, in London, sorry. And now we're in New York, just because, the US market is probably our biggest market, and I think we need to set foot in the country at some point.
Mm-hmm. So, it's a beautiful space. I mean, it's the objects that you have here is just nicely curated. We've got books, paintings, ads on the wall. There's a car over my right shoulder that looks pretty familiar. Yeah. So yes, you've already become quickly a friend of the brand of Analog Shift. So again, I'm super grateful that we could be here to film. So we had a lot of stuff going on recently, right? As far as like events, Josh, Nick, we've been like all over the map. It's that time of year. The watch industry is buzzing, and one of which the events that we attended was Baltic here. So you guys debuted the successful, now the watches are all sold out, the Prismic collection with stone dials. We'll definitely get to that. That is the main topic of today, stone dials and the stone dial trend. But yeah, so we can't wait to really dive into that. But first off, before we start, we have a few housekeeping things. Wind Up is going to be happening October 18th to October 20th. And we're super stoked to say that we're going to be part of Wind Up this year. First time for us. It's Warner Wound's hometown show in New York. It's going to be the biggest venue that they've ever had Wind Up at. It's going to be, in terms of number of brands that's going to be there, it's going to be the largest show. And the fact that we get to be a part of it is going to be super exciting. Of course, we're going to bring watches. We'll also have some new merch, a couple of surprises, some events surrounding the show. And I think it would be really awesome for, fans of the brand and just fans of vintage European watches to come by the booth and to say hello and to meet the team. But you guys will be there as well, right?
Yeah, we've been attending for now, I think, the better part of 7 years, I think. Mm-hmm. First time we went there were like, I think 16 brands. Now it's 150.
Yeah.
So it's grown exponentially, I think. And it just speaks for the enthusiasm there's around watches now.
For sure.
In the past, 7 years.
I mean, Baltic has been in the game. In microbrand, like that spectrum of microbrands, like you guys are old. Yeah. Where I don't think we can even consider you guys a microbrand.
Yeah, it's the definition is quite tricky, I think, because on the one side, there's this we now have a huge collection. There's I think 11 collections now, 50 models. But we're still a small team. There's like 15 people working for the company. So we're at an in-between, but definitely going away from the microbrand as a definition, I think.
Yeah, 11 collections, nearly 50 watches, 3 showrooms, I might add.
In some of the biggest,
in 3 different countries.
Coolest cities in the world.
Right, so casually New York, Paris, and London. Again, we were talking off camera, but that just, how it reads, it just says a lot as far as like what you guys have been able to accomplish in what is relatively a short amount of time since 2017, which Etienne started the brand through Kickstarter, which is nuts. And the fact that you guys are here, and again, the most recent collection, the Prismic collection with stone dials, again, sold out. You had mentioned that the last watch, the slowest to sell out,
was the lapis,
and which was in
6 minutes.
6 minutes.
Slowest.
I mean, if that's not anything that says like how cool these watches present in person. Again, when we were at the event, we were able to see these watches, and they're quite stunning, which leads me into wrist check, right? So, since I have one of your watches here right now, and again, you've been gracious enough to let us wear a couple of these. I have the Baltic Prismic in jade.
Exactly, yeah.
Super stunning. Yes, this is the one I gravitated towards at the event, and it's still the one. I had to fight Nick for it before we started recording here, but yes, it's really awesome. How about you, man? What do you have on wrist?
I am wearing my personal MR01. It was actually a watch I bought before working for the company back in, I think it was 2022. Bought the watch, wore it for pretty much 6 months straight, and after that, I decided to apply for a job because it was way too good not to keep going.
Did you wear that to the interview?
Yeah, actually.
Okay, that's like a good, that's a nice way to kind of like come into the interview. Yeah, just casually show it off.
Yeah, it's a nice icebreaker for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Josh, how about you, man?
He also, Remi was gracious to loan me this piece, part of the Prismic collection. This is the London edition with the agate dial. I swapped it out for one of the Baltic straps, a green canvas, which I think complements it beautifully. K size is great, like lug to lug, relatively short, just really nice wearing watch. Has ETA movement as well, which is great. Love it.
Yeah, great.
And
what about you, Nick?
Yeah, as we mentioned, TC kind of stole the watch off my wrist. So I had to settle for what I came here with, which is a vintage Zenith A385, kind of a classic, chronograph, one of the earliest. So
yeah, I actually prefer that case to the other
A386.
Exactly. Yeah. How about you guys? What do you guys think about that case? Yeah.
For me as well, I actually prefer this. I mean, they consider it tonneau shaped, but yeah, I think it's unique.
I think exactly. I think it's unique. There are not too many chronographs with that case shape.
You're right.
So if I was to get one, I would do the A385 definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
It was, for sure.
It was so well on the wrist.
It's
super compact.
And it's, again, relatively thin too for an automatic chronograph. Nice dome to the sapphire.
Yeah, good choice, man. Sorry, I'll let you wear this afterwards.
Okay.
Maybe. All right. So we're here today, obviously, to talk about the Prismic collection. But I think this was a perfect opportunity for us to kind of zoom out a little bit and to kind of take a look at stone dials as a whole. They've definitely been trending. We're definitely big proponents of the stone dial. I mean, we have a ton of Piagets right now. Audemars Piguets. Exactly. Exactly. Some Movados. So yeah, it just seems like there is a trend right now for stone dials. I mean, I think I wouldn't be going far as to say it's like hot. It's like the hot thing, right? You're seeing it on red carpets. You're seeing an increased amount of inquiries and enthusiasm for stone dial watches. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of first zoom out and just kind of talk about the history of stone dials. And I had mentioned Piaget, and Piaget was one of the first manufacturers to do it, right? In the 1960s to implement a stone dial in their watches. And I felt like that was one of their first steps into kind of making themselves more distinguishable, right? They were doing the whole integrated bracelet thing, as were other brands. They were doing the whole like avant-garde, design-forward jewelry thing, as were other brands. But stone dials, I think that was the one thing about that brand that kind of like elevated them a little further. And there were other brands as well that were doing that. Audemars Piguet, Rolex,
Cartier at some point.
Exactly, Cartier. And then, funny enough, Cartier was Cartier had made pieces, or they had commissioned Piaget to make pieces, which is crazy. I mean, we had that one watch that was a Cartier by Piaget,
Yep.
which is wild. Yeah, it's yeah. But then just in general, stone dials, stone in general, they've been used in jewelry for like
Millennia.
beginning
Yeah.
of time,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And
Mesopotamia.
Yep.
Mesopotamia, Egypt, and like often these materials were used to signify like royalty, status, and so on. So like it's kind of crazy how this has just been in the history books in terms of jewelry, and more recently watches, right? So I guess my first question to you, Remi, is like, what was your first experience with stone dial watches, or just stone dials in general?
Yeah, I've been into that for a little now. I mean, I can show you guys.
Yeah.
That one, which is kind of an interesting one. We talk about being in vintage pieces. That one is from, I think, the 70s or the 80s.
Mm-hmm. So this is the one that got you into stone dial.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Turquoise dial, yellow gold plated case. It's actually, funny enough, it's a Puzzle 7001, which is the exact same movement you'll find in the Prismic.
Oh, really?
Interesting. Wow, what a
speaks for
connection there.
itself.
That's awesome.
And yeah, it was my first experience with a stone dial. Outside of Baltic.
Was this piece like passed down to you, or did you
No,
acquire
I found
it?
it. I bought it from Mendel Watches. I think it was a year and a half ago, a year ago, something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've been working on stone dials for now. I think about the same amount of time, a year and a half approximately. It was at the same time as the regular, let's say, Prismic.
Right.
I think that's a good point worth highlighting. Like, you can think now that with stone dials being so popular, making a stone dial is following the trend, an easy choice. But in reality, to come out with a production stone dial watch, you have had to have already had this idea years in the past. You've been developing this watch, kind of ahead of the curve, but it's so timely right now. Sure.
So it's cool. There's always some lag in the between the release date and the production, and especially to have dials that are production ready, which is always the hard pick for these particular dials, because they tend to crack very easily. It's always a struggle at first, and then when you get to that's part of the reason why we first launched the, again, quote unquote, regular Prismic, which is just that you have to pick the stone you want, and then you have to try to see if it's actually doable, and then you get into production. So I think that's why we've decided to come up with a limited amount of pieces, just because it's very hard to work with.
Yeah. No, for sure. Josh, how about you when it comes to stone dial watches? I mean, do you recall like the one watch that kind of just caught your eye at first, or just how you like kind of got into it? Or
For me, it's vintage Rolex, specifically day dates. The first thing that comes to mind is like a coral dial, or just a onyx dial with no indices. For me, that's so 70s, so 80s. For me, that vintage Rolex probably got me into stone dials. And like talking about the resurgence of interest in stone dials or just color dials, I again can like trace that back to like the OP Oyster Perpetual re-release with all the bright colors a few years ago. Those weren't stone dials, but they had the same aesthetic, and I think they got people interested into this, like, a brightly colored watch face, basically. Yeah.
And also like mated with a historically like sporty case, which is kind of a fun, I don't know, dynamic. You normally think of the dress aspect of a stone dial and jewelry, and then putting that in, sporty kind of style case that you can wear all around is a cool feat. So,
I mean, like meteorite dials too.
Yeah.
Like we don't think of them as stone dial, like but they are. Yeah,
they are.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
How about you, Nick? What was the first
I
watch
think
that comes to mind as far as stone dials go?
Yeah, I think Rolex as well for me. Obviously, those have gotten very hot as of recent, and the pricing for those have skyrocketed. So that's why even more timely the fact that you can get a modern stone dial watch at such an amazing price point is like really cool.
Because it was traditionally reserved, for really top end pieces, like blue chip.
So they didn't used to stock them. They would have been kind of per order. It wasn't something that the stores would have had ready. They were always a special thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. And the fact that now you guys come out with this watch, I mean, it just offers like a ton of value. And when you start comparing what other stone dial watches command right now in the market, right?
Yeah,
I mean, granted, this one, like, stainless steel, right? Versus like something in precious metal. So it does kind of make sense. And again, there's an interesting value proposition here with the Prismic. And I get, I mean, again, it has sold out, so it's not like someone can go and grab these watches right now. But for those that were lucky enough to purchase this watch, I feel like they do have like an interesting watch. I mean, it didn't break the bank, so good on you guys for making that happen.
Yeah, sure. And I think it's also a tell of the market. We've been in this. I think we've got out of the kind of sports watch era a bit. Modern subs are not as popular as they used to be, and now people tend to go back to pieces that are a bit more special, a bit more interesting. We talked about sword dials, the bright colors. It's kind of a departure. I think it's a bit the same as in the 60s and 70s when Piaget, Rolex, as we talked about, tried to do something different and something quite unique. And I think it's always going back in a circle. And
it's all cyclical in a way, right? One of my first encounters, and I think it was just recently, friends, I'm sure they're friend. You guys are buddies with the guys over at Nevada. They released an F77 with a lapis. And again, Nick, to your point, you had mentioned like combining these stone dials, which is supposed to be this like refined aesthetic with like a stainless steel sport configuration. Kind of like there's this interesting combination there. Do you guys think that like that combination works? Like, if you do combine something like this with like a stainless steel sports watch, like what are your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, I think it works perfectly.
Yeah,
definitely.
Same. I think juxtaposition is so interesting for me, and I would probably prefer a really interesting dial on a maybe kind of boring designed sports watch. I think adds interest.
Makes it stand out.
Makes it stand out. People are not as conservative with their watch choices in regards to their clothing as much these days. So people want something fun. So I'm 100% for it.
I think along with that is like maybe some of the boring kind of classic case designs are some of the most comfortable, some of the most versatile that you can wear with a t-shirt or wear with a nice outfit, and then allowing the stone dial or something fun with that is cool.
Yeah. Stone dials in general, they're a way to kind of show just another way to show the artistry that can happen with watches. When you start thinking about how these stones are cut, right, there's a certain intention, right, that needs to be like, okay, we're going to cut it this way because we want this pattern to show. Each pattern that shows on each dial is unique to that watch.
Exactly.
Right? You're not going to have the same exact pattern on each watch. And you also mentioned like how like they have to be cut the proper size, right? Because too thin, it'll break, right? Too thick, then the watch is too heavy. So I think there's a certain intention that goes into stone dials that is equivalent to, say, the guilloche on a rotor or the hammer finish on a dial or bracelet, right? So I mean, what do you guys, just as a whole, like with stone dials, like what else do you think like makes them so unique?
I mean, definitely the patterns. You get tons of variation, especially on the agate. Because you have those kind of rays in the stone that are pretty unique. It's a way to get a piece that differs, and each dial is going to be unique. You want something as a brand. You want something that is as homogeneous as possible, but you do want some variation. You don't want to have the exact same watch all across because you lose a bit the quirk of a stone dial.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
it's a matter of picking the right stone, and definitely rejection rates are high on these.
Exactly. So it reminds me of like an enamel dial. A Grand Complication Patek. One out of only every maybe 10 dials might actually make it through the entire process. So there's that level of craftsmanship that I appreciate with the stone dials. And like we've been saying, it's even though like the case is homogeneous, each dial, like literally every single dial, will have a slight variation. So almost like getting a piece unique, basically.
Yeah. For me, it's like zooming out and kind of realizing what this is. Like some people, it just kind of looks cool, but then realizing, okay, this is like a piece of the earth that you're wearing that was once a rock or a stone somewhere and was mined and like goes through, this intense process to then be your dial is kind of crazy. I don't know why, but it's
just the whole watch,
cool.
though. Like even the case, like it was just a piece, like a rock in the earth, and just like speaking to like human ingenuity,
The fact that like, and you were mentioning meteorites, like that rock wasn't even here. Like it came from space. And then now it's on this planet, and now we're gonna put it in a watch, which is kind of nuts, right?
Kudos to the first guy who said, let's cut that rock in half and make it a dial.
Exactly. Like what, like I just wonder like what just drives people. And again, it's just like inspiration, right? It's all like, I'm sure there's a quote there somewhere. Josh, you're the artist, right? Like what is the quote? Like life imitates art, or art imitates that's like kind of like what it is. And then just inspiration is everywhere. And you said that this is the first watch that you that like kind of got you into stone dials. And just even with this, like it's not just a standard turquoise stone dial. I mean, just under a loop, or just even right now, you could see that there's a certain texture, there's a certain dynamism that happens with stone dials. I don't know, like what are your guys like experiences with seeing like patina on stone dials? Like do stone dials patina? Do certain stones
I've seen I can't remember the name of the stone. It was on vintage dates. Had I can't remember. It was not onyx. It was supposed to be black at first. Can't remember the name of the stone, but it got transparent at some point.
Oh no way!
You could see the glue from behind. I can't remember the actual stone. You do have some patina on certain stones.
Cool.
I mean, speaking to that, like when you guys do these stone dials, is there any type of like lacquer on top of the stone, or how is it done?
Not on top, not that I know of. But especially for the agates and the jade, which are quite, I mean, you can definitely see those. These are quite transparent stones. And just to have a bit more, pop, you apply the dial on the back of the dial, which is painted. That way you have a bit more color coming through. So it's it's a good
because I know with lapis, like if it's cut too thin, it becomes very transparent. So I guess it gives you that backing that you need. Okay,
definitely. Most of the stones, are originally kind of glass. So when you cut them, of course, you're gonna have some transparency.
Cool.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
Just see if it's if I know the number, and if not.
Sorry for the quick break. We're back. The phone has been ringing off the charts here. And for those watching, no, there are none left for the Prismic collection of the new dials. But sorry, back into it.
All right, let's switch gears here a little bit. I mean, we're into vintage watches. How about you? Like, is there anything that, like, do you own any vintage watches?
A couple, I mean, I own mostly vintage, actually.
All right.
Just because I think I have one modern sports watch, which is an OP. I think it was back when it was still the super cases. So it's a 116. Can't remember the end of
reference,
it. But 116 for sure. So I have this guy, but the rest is vintage.
Okay.
I have a couple vintage APs that are all broken for now, but
Okay.
Hey, we can help with that.
Yeah.
yeah,
Service
hopefully,
guy.
yeah, hopefully we'll get them back soon.
Yeah, we'll take care of you. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Then a Santos 2161.
Okay.
And yeah, a bunch of other vintage pieces, vintage JLC. So yeah, definitely vintage oriented.
What is it about vintage that speaks to you? Like, why go that route when you can, go the microbrand route, you can go the brand new route?
I'd say, well, first the size. Nowadays, it's hard to find. The biggest I would wear would be, let's say, 39 max. Usually I wear 36 and under. So yeah, definitely the sizing, and there's a certain charm to a vintage piece that you can't find anymore, in my opinion. So I think it's for those two reasons. And you get sometimes watches with a cool story behind them, even though I'm not too attached to provenance. It's always cool to see who got the watch before you.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, read that paper, you see the name.
Or case back engraving, etc.
Right.
Well, to me, then the vintage, there's maybe a correlation with like the stone dials in a way that what vintage has automatically is that everyone is different. And just because of the time and the life it's lived, like a stone dial, how every single one is going to be different, and it has that kind of differentiator that a modern watch, you can't tell the difference between.
I mean, when you take a look at a modern Rolex, it's going to be the same in 20 years.
Yeah,
whereas if
100%.
you take a look at a 20-year-old Rolex, different.
Yeah.
Different loom. The lacquers they used weren't as stable. The bezel material, etc. Yeah.
I mean, when we take a look at your 1675, and you put a new Pepsi next to it, when you take a look at the two watches in 20 years, it's not going to be the same. For sure.
100%.
Yeah. And then, for me, like, I was on the subway recently, and again, there's just something striking about, say, like a vintage Pepsi versus like a modern Pepsi. I feel like, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but like if someone is standing on the other side of a subway car, like I could just spot that thing. I'm like, man, like that's so nice to look at right now. Versus like, and again, this is not a slight to modern Rolex in any ways, but like, again, I just prefer vintage. And again, you made a good point with the size as well. We recently got a Cartier Carré in, and I've long been like a fan of the Cartier Santos Medium. I've said it on record that the Santos Medium, the modern one, is like the best case size. But then you look at a vintage Cartier Carré 24 millimeter case width, and I'm like, it wears like so well. Like I'm like, they got it right. Then and there,
It's insane how proportions have changed. And I think it's all a matter of getting used to the size. In the end, you can wear something that is 31, 32 easily. It's if it was good enough in 50 years ago, it's good enough today too.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like Baltic in general, like their aesthetic lines up.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Right. With like vintage watches, right? There's definitely some inspiration, some design cues that are pulled from different models. Definitely like Calatrava-esque, right? And especially with these, the Prismic stone dials, right? The design language is much more restrained than the regular dial Prismics, right? Very Calatrava-esque. And again, but it's its own thing.
With like modern ingenuity, because if I'm not mistaken, mid case is titanium, right?
Yeah.
So that's something that's like
the construction is quite singular on this one.
Yeah.
So it's a 5-piece construction case. You have basically the bezel, the case back, and the locks that are separate from the mid case, and then you have 4 screws coming from under the lugs that secure them to the rest of the case, which is a big departure from what we were used to doing in the cases, which are more of a monoblock approach.
Right.
Whereas these, there's tons of little details, and it's the whole purpose of this collection, which is to experiment as much as possible, whether it's stone dials, complications, the case material itself. There's tons of areas where I think we can play.
For sure. I mean, I just think about like if I were the owner of this watch and going to a watch meetup and just describing this watch, like, yeah, you know, it's an independent brand. It's got a stone dial, a titanium mid case. That's just so fun to
And
say.
for a dress
And
watch,
then-
it's uncommon.
yeah, and then
Yeah.
you hand it to someone. So like when I first had this watch in hand, it's so light, and I was like wondering why
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
so
Yeah,
light.
yeah.
But in a good way, you know, not in a like off-putting way.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah, these watches are a lot of fun. Uh, yeah, I mean, all right. So in general, right, like where, like, I guess I have two questions for you, and then feel free, guys, to just chime in. Like the status of, let's say, like microbrands as a whole right now, right? Baltic has been in the game since 2017. Like you're still seeing brands pop up today that are maybe like 1 or 2 years old that are like, you could just tell that there's just so much more runway for those brands and for Baltic, right? Like everybody has their own journey. So like, do you think like, I mean, the watches in general has not been that, like, hasn't been more popular, right? So like, what's your take about like, you know, microbrands starting now as opposed to where Baltic started in 2017? Like, are there the same hoops? Are there the same like obstacles that they have to face, or is it easier to start a microbrand right now? I mean, what's your take on that?
I mean, on the one side, it's let's say easier because now people are into that stuff, but it's another thing that now there are just so many brands that are starting at the same time that it, unless you have a very specific niche that you've aimed. I'm thinking top of my head is Richard's what's Richard been doing lately with the Studio Underdog. For
Oh
example.
yes,
Yeah.
so
He found
funky,
his
man. Yeah.
niche, and that's where you can differentiate yourself from the others, and that's where you can shine the most, I think. In let's say 10 years, the brands that will remain will be the ones that have found their niche and have found their core customers and can now present new things to this existing pool of customer. Whereas a brand that has stayed a bit bland to try to please everyone, I think you have to differentiate yourself.
Yeah,
definitely.
And what about stone dials in general? Like, what do you think about like the trend? Have we reached peak stone dial?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think it's only the
just
beginning.
getting started.
Yeah. I mean, Piaget is leading the way, of course, in the bigger brands, but I think it's just a matter of time before everyone tries at least to have something that resembles a stone dial.
Yeah. What about you guys? What do you guys think?
I mean, I agree with him. I think the market definitely is more saturated now with microbrands. So you do have to differentiate yourself. I mean, the first things that come to mind are like Unimatic, like this kind of like brutalist architecture. Brew watches, they're in their own lane. Baltic, of course. So I think like maybe actually like getting the watches made right now is actually easier. Just like there are more suppliers, it's easier to reach out to them. But yeah, to set yourself apart, I think it's more difficult now. And Baltic has shown they have the staying power to like for a microbrand or a previous microbrand to still continuously be in business approaching 10 years. That is like a true feat.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'd say, that more complicated doesn't necessarily mean it's differentiated and better. Like I think Baltic has done a good job of showing like you can take something kind of classic and improve upon it and make it better, and that's differentiation as well. It doesn't need to be wild and something crazy out of the box. That just on improving on some classic stuff is like really cool.
Yeah, I mean, all the big dogs, that's how they operate, right? They make changes glacially, like Rolex. I mean, it's like why mess with it, right? So the fact that you guys have built 11 different collections, and then now you have the ability and staying power to just be like, okay, like maybe we'll just make this minute change, and your core customer will notice and just be like, this is worth like grabbing this watch.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And it's funny, because on the one side, differentiating yourself is good, but I think also the key seller of being a microbrand is being close to the watch community. And I think it's something that sets us apart a bit because we try as much as possible to engage with people, with the showrooms, with the watch fairs, etc. It's, the key seller of a micro brand is usually that you're closer to your community than a big brand, let's say. So, but the paradox is that usually micro brands are solely online, which is kind of weird. And being able to engage with people in real life and seeing people in the flesh, having feedback, direct feedback, I think it's the way to go for us. And that's why I think we've built those showrooms, and we're going to keep on going with these. It's a no-brainer, I think.
I mean, and going off of that, I think another key component to the success of a new watch brand is customer service. And you guys have been so good at that. I've never heard anything bad about Baltic. And just, I mean, we wouldn't even be doing this right now if you hadn't, again, networking, you came to our showroom, I met you, this is how this all happened. Just like doing right by new customers who want to get into this. I think probably one of the most important things.
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. And I think that's why the watch industry is so attractive for people to go work in, because you first come for I'd say you first come for the products, but then you stay for the people you meet.
Yeah.
Just because it's a super small world, and once you're in it, it's you meet a ton of people that you wouldn't believe you could meet.
Yeah.
And you just want to stay because it's too good not to stay.
You definitely can make fast friends very easily here, and I can't tell you how many times that has happened. I mean, this is, we're truly excited. And again, like the opportunity to come visit the showroom and have hands-on time with your watches is something that we can understand and relate to, because that's like something we like to like build on and offer to our clients, right? Is the fact that they can come in and try on these pieces. At the end of the day, that's like what it is, right? You've got to like see these watches in person, and not only that, it's making that connection, right? It's understanding like, hey, I'm not just going here to, visit Baltic because I like the brand and I like their watches, but now it's like Remi is like the guy, and I'm not just saying this because we're on camera. Because it's easy to chat with you, so you've definitely made this easy on us. But yeah, no, we're super excited to see what you guys have on the horizon. I feel like Wind Up is going to be very exciting. If anyone who's watching is going to come by, just be ready to wrestle with the group of
New York
people.
is intense. You'll see
the 4 or 5 rows of people that are just clamoring to get to the Baltic booth. But super exciting, and we appreciate you having us here. For the people, how do they find you, right? How do they find the Baltic showroom? What's the best way to make an appointment, and so on?
Well, directly on the website is the easiest. You just head to the website. There's a section where you can select the time frame you want, and then I usually reach out directly, send you the pass to go to show reception as you've experienced,
right? Which is fairly seamless, by the way.
Very easy.
Yeah,
we
just
try
make
to,
sure.
We try to have it as seamless as possible.
Right.
But, it's kind of a
be ready to pose for the photo, right? Yeah.
It's not the best angle,
right? Yeah. All right, awesome, man. And then at Baltic Watches, right, on Instagram, right?
Yeah.
Okay, very cool.
I'm gonna just, before we hang up, I'm gonna ask just a industry question for you while we have you. Is like, I feel like you often hear now, like with microbrands or brands like Baltic, it's a great entry point for watch collectors. That's like something to say. It's an entry point. Kind of, what's your take on that as far as it being entry level, or is it also something that you can just exist in that kind of space?
I don't think it's just an entry. I mean, yes, the price point is on the more affordable side, but it's funny because of the design language we are able to target people that have 150 watches, just like people who have one.
Yeah,
and I think it's a cool thing. I've I've already seen plenty of huge pieces here at the showroom. Guys coming with FP Jaune and just getting a strap for their MR roulette. So it's kind of insane.
So with that, what watch collector would you say is the hardest to convince of a microbrand or Baltic?
Well, I'd say it's the kind of tough.
Brand snobs.
The brand snobs?
Brand snobs. Yeah.
Yeah, you always nitpicky about particular things. You try to make sense of it all. But it's always at some point you need to compromise, and sometimes they don't understand that.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's.
Well, I feel like that's what puts you guys in a good spot, is that you guys have such a diverse collection. So if someone has a Submariner or an Aquanaut, right? And why not? You can spend, less than $1,000, or slightly north of $1,000 for a stone dial dress watch, or you can grab an MR1, right?
MR Classic now.
Exactly, MR Classic. Yeah, excuse me, but and then vice versa, right? Like if someone owns a Calatrava, dude, you guys got a couple of dive watches, one of which in in titanium, like different configurations. So it just offers an ability for everyone to kind of like get in, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to mean like, oh, it's like an entry watch, right?
Yeah, definitely not.
And I think that's the beauty of it, where it's like, someone can get into watches because of microbrands, and then they expand their taste, like their tastes evolve, and maybe they get into pre-owned and vintage, or maybe they go like strictly compressor cases, right? And then vice versa, someone who gets in because
Weirdo.
What's that?
Weirdo.
But yeah, so it's like, and again, vice versa, right? Like someone can just be into, again, like it just taste evolve, right? So I definitely can see a world where all of these tastes and brands and stone dials, or just strictly like robust steel watches, they can all like live in the same space, right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I think it's really interesting if someone gets into watches through a microbrand, because they are harder to seek out if you're not in the watch realm.
Right.
I mean, if like it's like the de facto to go to one of the big Swiss brands. So I whenever I hear someone is like their first watch is like a microbrand, I know that's like a watch person.
Definitely.
Yeah. Isn't that funny how that works out? Like you notice like the subtle nuances of how someone wears a watch, or what watch they're wearing. Like you had mentioned, so if someone's wearing like a Baltic, you're just like, oh, that's a watch guy. The other day I saw someone wearing a Speedy on like a green NATO, and I'm like, that's a watch guy.
Yeah, on the NATO, for sure it's a watch guy.
Are there like any little like telltale signs that I'm just like, oh yeah, that's a watch guy?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's always maybe not a strange strap, but a combo that Omega would not sell you from the get go. I think it's a telltale.
Time not actually set, right?
Yeah. It can be. It could be both for these. Or anything. I'd say anything vintage, unless it's been passed down.
Yeah. Right.
I think when you take the step forward to go buy a vintage watch, I think there's some necessary steps before in terms of research. You have to. It's a more tricky purchase. So you have to make your own research, and it's not something one would do if they were not into it. So I think it's a way to recognize someone.
I get what you're saying, because it's like someone's wearing an Eberhard or like a Galet, right? Shout out Galet, or like a 62 Mas Seiko, right? It's just like no one is wearing it has that watch just to like have it, right? Like there was like some sort of like purpose there of like, all right, I'm gonna hunt this watch down, especially if it's like in great condition. Yes, it could be passed down. Again, that's the beauty of it, right? It's someone can get into watches because someone passes down like a vintage diver, and it's just like, what is this about? Like, I can tell the time on my phone, but like this thing is cooler, let me, start reading Hodinkee, or, let me start going through the Analog Shift website. But yeah, no, that was a great question, Nick. But yeah, I mean, again, I just want to say thank you for having us here. Again, folks, if you want to visit the showroom, they're here in Soho at 110 Green
110
Street.
Green Street.
Yep,
110
on the
Green.
10th floor. Like how the numbers kind of like are just matching there.
1010, yeah.
Yeah, and just like you said, reach out on the website, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I appreciate it, man. Very cool. We're very excited for what Baltic has to offer, like down the line, and we'll be wind up mates, right?
Yeah.
Cohorts, right?
Yeah.
Definitely,
We'll
yeah.
pass by the booth. You know, we'll wave hi over the crowd, and
Ask you if there are any Prismic left.
yeah. Actually, if you guys have a phone at the booth, you know, just keep calling, you know. And then yeah, for sure. And then again, you can come visit us as well,
definitely.
you know, and
I'll
check
come
out
back
some
for sure,
vintage
yeah.
watches, you know. All right, well, that about does it for episode 7. That's Stone Dials in a nutshell. Again, Remi, thank you for having us. As always, like and subscribe to stay tuned for all the outstanding content that we have on YouTube. And also, you can find us on Instagram at Analog Shift. And as always, you can email us at info@analogshift. If you see any watches on the website, have any questions, feel free to email us. Josh and I will be able to get back to you. And also, if you have any servicing questions or have any servicing needs, Nick the service guy. So
Hit me up.
hit him up. But that about does it. See you guys next time.